I'm Ernie Anastas, and here's what's happening. It was a night of tragedy, and now the city is in mourning over the cold-blooded murders of two young police officers gunned down in the line of duty. At this hour, an intensive search continues for two cop killers wanted in connection with the blatant murders. The first murder, shortly after 7 p.m. on West 105th Street in Upper Manhattan. A 26-year-old plainclothes narcotics officer gunned down in a buy-and-bust drug raid that went sour when the drug dealers apparently recognized the officer. One of the suspects was killed in the shootout, another arrested, and a third escaped. And then, some 3 hours later, at about 55 blocks to the north, another officer shot to death again by a suspected drug dealer. This time, a 24-year-old uniformed officer shot in the stomach and chest as he chased a suspect on Broadway. The officer was not wearing a bulletproof vest.
The night of tragedy has left a lot of unanswered questions. We have a series of reports, beginning with Jim Dolan, who is live at the 34th Precinct in Upper Manhattan. Jim.
Roz, we are at the 34th Precinct, where one suspect remains in custody, still being interrogated by police on the second floor here of the 34th Precinct. We expect him to be moved to central booking within the hour. It was a night last night that will not soon be forgotten, especially not by police, especially police in Upper Manhattan. If ever a single night underscored the dangers of police work and the courage of those who undertake it, it was October 18th, 1988, when two cops, doing what cops do every day, were gunned down in totally unrelated incidents just 3 hours apart. On this deadliest of nights on the streets of Upper Manhattan, the tension was as thick as the vest on a policeman's chest. Shotguns at the ready, cops were determined that no more blue blood would be spilled and that those responsible would be caught. In Manhattan Valley, 105th Street near Central Park West, where crack is as common as cold beer and less expensive, two undercover cops were involved in a routine buy-bust operation on the top floor of this building. Buy the drugs, bust the dealer. That's the way it's supposed to go. But as the deal went down, something went wrong, and one cop was made, identified as a cop by one of the drug dealers.
One of the drug dealers accused the undercovers of being police officers and pulled a gun. A struggle ensued, during which the undercover officer was shot and one of the suspects was killed. The other undercover officer managed to run to the street, where he alerted the backup team, and as the backup officers entered the apartment, they found a wounded officer lying on the floor.
26-year-old Christopher Hoban, just 4 years on the force, was shot in the head and chest. He later died from those wounds. One suspect, Manuel De La Rosa, was killed by police in the gun battle. Another suspect was captured, a third escaped. By 7-11 last night, one cop was dead. But the streets don't slow down when a cop is shot. The tension only mounts. At around 10 o'clock, some 55 blocks north, two uniformed officers were leaving a building on 161st Street. They noticed two men acting suspiciously. When the police asked them to stop, the men fled. As the police pursued, one of the two men turned.
One was immediately apprehended, and as the second one was about to be restrained, he turned and fired with what we believe to be a semi-automatic.
Officer Michael J. Busick was shot in the chest and abdomen and later died at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. Both suspects were later caught by police. Outside the 34th Precinct, banners of mourning, and inside, wreaths from grieving police officers and votive candles. By the time the dust had cleared last night, two cops were dead, one suspect dead, two suspects in custody, and one remains at large. There is a massive search for him right now. All in all, a tragic and poignant reminder of what is in New York City a risky business, the business of police work. Now, we said one suspect is here and one suspect remains at large. We expect to get an update on the investigation looking for that man in just a few minutes. Sarah Wallace is at One Police Plaza now with more on that. Sarah.
Well, Jim, you can see standing behind me a number of top police officials. We're expecting this news conference to get underway at any moment. We're hoping to get an update on the status of the two men in custody in connection with the double shootings, as well as on the two suspects at large at this very moment. As Jim said, there is one suspect in custody at the 34th Precinct in connection with the Michael Busick shooting. He has not yet been identified. We expect him to be charged at any moment. However, the other suspect, described only as a male Hispanic, is still missing. As a police helicopter hovered over Highbridge Park in Washington Heights early this morning, shotgun-toting members of the emergency services unit scoured the ground, looking for clues to the missing suspect. These officers left no doubt as to their feelings about what happened last night.
This is a perfect example of why we need a death penalty in the state of New York. Well, it's not that. You know, the thing that's annoying about it is, you know, these two cops are dead. And even when they catch these guys, they're going to go to jail and get paroled in a few years.
So what do you think should happen?
Death penalty. That's why we need a death penalty.
The cops concentrated their search for the second suspect on Highbridge Park, just a few blocks away from the second shooting. They looked here all night and this morning continued to search the heavily wooded area. Meantime, at the 24th Precinct, police were booking 49-year-old Flavio Profetti, a Haitian who moved here 17 years ago for the murder of undercover cop Christopher Hoban. It was Profetti's apartment on West 105th Street where the drug deal turned deadly last night. Neighbors say Profetta had lived in this building for about 4 years and that he began dealing drugs about a year ago. The apartment was very busy.
I see traffic. People coming in, coming out, coming in, coming out, all day long, all night.
So you knew they were dealing drugs?
Well, you could say that.
Did you know drug dealing was going on in there?
Oh, sure I did. Yes, I knew drug dealing was going on there, but fear for myself and my family, I had to keep my mouth shut. You see, and I'm glad I did, because now I know if I would have said something, maybe I'd be laying down 6 feet.
Police believe Profetta and the suspect killed last night during the drug deal, 23-year-old Manuel De La Rosa, were so-called steerers, greeting the cops at the entrance of the apartment building and leading them upstairs. They think that the unidentified missing suspect was the one who pulled out a gun and shot Hoban. Sarah Wallace back here live now at One Police Plaza. We're getting an update on the investigation from Deputy Commissioner Richard Congdon. We're going to go to him live now as he's updating us on the first incident which took place shortly after 7 o'clock last night, in which an undercover police officer was shot and killed.
Police Officer Hoban went into the apartment. He was followed shortly thereafter by Police Officer Germain. While they were in the apartment, a person by the name of Danielle Bienvenido Castillo, who we are looking for and who we have a photograph of, started to question the police officers. He pulled a gun from behind a clock that was next to a table he was standing at. He threatened Police Officer Hoban with the gun. There was a struggle between Police Officer Hoban and this Danielle for the gun. At the same time, there was a struggle between Police Officer Germain and Flavio Profetti. Police Officer Germain's gun was taken from him. While he was struggling with Profetti, he heard shots. At that point, Profetti and Danielle ran out of the apartment with the police officer ran out. Police Officer Germain ran out with them, behind them. He got to the street. He called for help that his partner, Police Officer Hoban, had been shot. And then he started to chase Danielle with another police officer. They lost him at about 105th Street, Manhattan Avenue.
That's Deputy Commissioner Richard Congdon giving us an update on the first police shooting which occurred last night, in which one officer was killed. There was another officer killed a short time later. We will have an update on the status of that investigation as well as on the first case tonight at 6 o'clock. Reporting live from One Police Plaza, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you very much, Sarah. The areas where those two police officers were killed have been plagued by drug problems for years. Art McFarland takes a look at two neighborhoods in Upper Manhattan where everyday life is a struggle to survive amidst drugs and violence.
The area surrounding West 105th Street, where the narcotics officer was killed, is a neighborhood in transition. It is racially mixed and part of the gentrification that has changed many other neighborhoods in the city. What gentrification has not changed here is the problem of drugs.
The drugs are so rampant and apparent in this neighborhood, and I mean, very little seems to be being done about it. I get up in the morning and there must be sometimes 10, 15 crack vials in my lobby in the morning when I leave.
I've been in the neighborhood about 10.5 years, and the drug scene is rough. It always has been. When I first moved here, it was heroin. I used to watch junkies walking around here all the time, you know, and now it's crack.
Many of the people here on 105th Street knew that this building was a center for drug activity. Police obviously knew it as well. Their efforts to do something about it led to last night's tragedy. But 105th Street was not always a problem. Fighting drugs can often be a shell game in which the drug dealers move around once the heat is on.
One of the worst streets in the city was West 107th Street. 2 years ago, with the help of the police department and the community board, we initiated the first TNT, if you will, although it was only for one block. Yet, because of the effort on 107th Street, the drug dealers moved to 105th Street and 109th Street. So now the two worst streets are 105th Street and 109th Street. And the amount of drug dealing that is reported to my office from the community is just extreme.
The second police shooting occurred at this building on West 161st Street near Broadway. This is Washington Heights, very different from the neighborhood further south. Here, the population is largely Dominican. The signs of trouble are more visible, the atmosphere more tense and threatening. The effects of drugs and violence are much more clear.
This area is made of drugs.
When I am in bed at night, I hear the shooting outside.
We're told that residents are likely to support police drug fighting efforts now more than ever, and that they still want their neighborhoods cleaned up, street by street and block by block. On the Upper West Side of Manhattan, Art McFarland, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And because of last night's tragedy, Police Commissioner Benjamin Ward says that officers on certain patrols will now be ordered to wear their bulletproof vests at all times. Well, these latest cop killings have raised new and some serious questions about the effectiveness of the war on drugs, whether programs at every level of government are capable of stopping drug dealers from taking over entire neighborhoods. Tim Minton now with an assessment of the war.
6-year-old officer Christopher Hoban was gunned down while working undercover on a cocaine deal. Hoban was shot in the head with a .357 Magnum on 105th Street near Central Park. One suspect was killed in the shootout, another arrested, a third remains on the loose. And just a short time ago, police released a picture of the man they are looking for. He is identified as Bienvenido Castillo. And tonight, police are also looking for a suspect in a second shooting last night that left 24-year-old officer Michael Buzak dead. That happened in crack-infested Washington Heights. Buzak was killed after stopping two men who were acting suspiciously. Police Commissioner Benjamin Ward was stunned by the double dose of tragedy.
In my memory, unfortunately, I know of several cases when two officers were shot in the same incident on a particular night. But I don't know of any case when two officers, one or more, were shot in separate incidents on the same night.
And just a short time ago, Ward told a news conference that as of midnight last night, all officers were required to wear bulletproof vests. What happened last night just throws one more log on the political fire that's been burning over the drug war. As Channel 2 News political correspondent Josh Mankiewicz reports, once again, there's a call to arms.
Last night brought the latest war of words over the war on drugs.
The only people who can deter the drug pushers would be the federal government in preventing the drugs from coming in, and they have failed miserably.
We are close to an election.
Be involved. We sure have a war going on in our own country, and it's being fought in every city, everywhere you look, in every neighborhood. And there doesn't seem to be too much question over who is winning the war on drugs. All of us are in it one way or another, and those we count on to protect us are being gunned down themselves. We'll be talking to Mayor Koch about that and about how he plans to get a death penalty back for drug murderers. And we'll also be talking to Officer Stephen McDonald. He's seen all too many fellow officers killed, some that by he himself who was paralyzed by a bullet. 2 New York City police officers have been shot and killed in the line of duty in little more than 24 hours. One an undercover cop buying cocaine, the other in uniform answering a call for help in an area teeming with crack dealers. They are the only latest casualties in a war that is getting deadlier and deadlier. We haven't seen anything like it, this open war on cops, since the 60s. Back then, it was political. The Black Liberation Army, other radical groups gunning for our police officers. Now it's drugs, and it's getting worse. Worse than Chicago in the 1930s. Bullets flying as organized crime groups do battle for control of the illegal drug trade. Only this time they're called cartels. They don't sell bootleg booze. They sell the very, very deadly, addictive form of cocaine called crack. They just as soon kill a cop as look at him. This year alone, February 26th, rookie police officer Edward Byrne shot and killed at dawn at point-blank range.
Hours of duty within 3 hours of each other. 26-year-old narcotics cop Christopher Hoban and 24-year-old officer Michael Buzak. And in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, the brother of the first cop who died at 7:30 last night cried with friends, while his parents cradled photos of Chris Hoban in happier times.
Absolutely unbelievable how well loved he was. He was so good.
You coddle him and nurse him and take him away on vacation, and then it's all gone.
This was the doorway of death for Chris Hoban. Dressed in street clothes, he hoped to fool 3 suspected drug dealers in apartment 2A at 19 West 105th Street. But neighbors easily recognized Hoban and his partner.
If you're going to come in, at least send in, you know, a black guy and a Spanish guy.
The cover was blown, and police believe this missing suspect fired the fatal bullets that slammed into Hoban's face and chest. But Hoban apparently succeeded in killing another suspect before he died. A third man, Flavio Profete, was captured and charged with murder this afternoon.
Anything to do with it? Did you do it?
No, I don't.
But more suspects must be caught in the murder of a second cop, 24-year-old Michael Buchek. That death scene was 56 blocks north on 161st Street and Broadway, where a uniformed Buchek tried to stop 2 possible drug suspects. One fired a 9mm automatic weapon, hitting Buchek twice in the chest.
You get some guys out here that just come out here and give 8.5. This guy came out here and he gave you all. He gave you 110%.
But Buchek was not wearing a bulletproof vest.
If you don't wear it, you basically losing a chance to live.
The intense manhunt that peaked with the shutting down of 8th Avenue subway lines last night continues with periodic raids at known drug locations. The tension is high in 2 Upper Manhattan communities that have tried repeatedly to rebuild a new face, only to be torn apart by drugs. Rodney Taylor now wants to move his wife and infant son Curtis out of 19 West 105th, where a cop lost his life. He remembers the traffic in apartment 2A, where Hoban died.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's it.
The police, we know, spend the same amount of time trying to curb the trade. But tonight, the flowers are lying near plaques commemorating the dead. I'm Mary Murphy, Channel 2 News.
I'm Lisa Rudolph. On the night after 2 young cops were gunned down, officers Gerard Siebert and Richard Welton are back on patrol a few blocks from one of the murder scenes. The night is quiet. It is not routine.
You just can't keep it on your mind. You just got to go out and do your job.
Is that hard to do, especially right now?
Well, yes, at this time, I guess, you know, it definitely, everybody is a lot more alert.
It was the first time in history that 2 guys were killed the same day, different incidents.
And it could have been you. It could be
been
you tonight.
That's right. You're on edge. You're on edge a little bit. But you do what you got to do. You got no choice.
There are those who say the war on drugs has turned into a war on cops. Of the 7 officers killed in the line of duty this year, 6 were drug-related. In February, rookie cop Ed Byrne assassinated while guarding a drug witness. In April, Officer Anthony McLean walked in on a drug deal. A few weeks later, Sergeant John McCormick killed in a shootout with drug suspects. In June, housing cop Gary Pico killed in a car chase. In August, Joe Galapo accidentally shot by his partner during a drug bust. Now, Chris Hoban and Michael Buchek's names have been added to the 1988 death list.
But I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better.
When 2 classic motion pictures will be brought together in a special...
About 3 hours after Hoban was shot, 24-year-old Officer Michael Buchek was also gunned down in a separate incident. Buchek, who lived in Suffern, New York, was married but had no children. He, too, was an honored cop. He was the recipient of an incredible 10 meritorious citations and 30 citations for excellence on the job after only 3 years on the force.
I worked with him. He was a good cop. He's just trying to do his job. And unfortunately, that's one too many that's been cut down this year trying to do his job.
No one could say today whether or not the 2...
Reports on drugs and politics.
...and were killed in the line of duty. In Manhattan, I'm Carol Iavana, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Police Commissioner Ben Ward has now ordered all uniform officers on patrol to wear bulletproof vests. He said the 2 officers killed might have survived had they been wearing them. Officers are issued bulletproof vests during their training, but were not required to wear them on the job until today's order.
The neighborhoods where the officers were killed are infamous. They're crack-infested and ruled by drug lords.
Tappy Phillips looks at the situation in those neighborhoods tonight following the killings. Tappy is live right now on West 105th Street. Tappy?
That's right, Coyote. This is where Christopher Hoban was gunned down last night during a drug bust. The residents here knew that drugs were being sold here, and they knew that police had been unable to stop them. Frustrations like this also exist 56 blocks north of here, where Michael Busick was gunned down. And as far as these residents are concerned, there's only one reason for this: crack. These folks live in the crack-infested neighborhood near 161st Street, and to them, crack caused the deaths of the two officers and the unrelenting crime they must live with.
If I come from college, if I come from work...
You can see it now. Head of the President's Task Force on Drugs, drug traffic goes up 400%.
But last night it sounded...
What calling in life is as difficult as today's police officers? Chris and Mike shared the vision that life could be better.
The dreams were crushed on the same night, less than 3 hours apart. And in Brooklyn at noon, the casket on the left carried a 26-year-old narcotics cop named Chris Hoban, who died first that night. Over to the right, 24-year-old Michael Busick, who leaves a young widow after 1 year of marriage. In life, Michael Busick lit up the 34th precinct with his astonishing street smarts, earning 41 citations in a 3-year career. Joe Barbado was the partner who watched a gunman turn a 9mm weapon on Busick Tuesday night.
I just want to remember Mike is my best friend, a great cop and a great guy. That's how I want to remember Mike.
Was it very tough to get through this today?
Of course it's very tough.
It is tough, too, for the undercover cops who put their lives on the line in crack dens every day. The partners of 26-year-old Chris Hoban, described as fearless in his pursuit of dealers tucked away in residential apartments.
To weep inside, but to do so openly would betray a lie we live every day. Men of steel.
Chris Hoban leaves behind a mother and dad and 3 brothers, one of them supposed to take the police test next week. His mom wanted the assembled to remember just one thing, that Chris was a gentle man. On the streets, the crowds could sense their pain.
When the family heart is broken, when the city is in motion of a police officer's dead, the whole city cries out, why?
When it was over, the church bells pierced the sky in Brooklyn, while police sharpshooters hovered overhead. It was a sign of a society stricken by evil, by the weight of daily drug battles. But Mayor Koch blamed another breed.
I have no compassion for the drug users.
Then there were these words from the widow of the 4th police officer killed this year.
I have 3.5-year-old twin girls, and they're still waiting for their daddy to come home. Picking up the pieces is a very hard thing to do, you know, but we're a family. We love each other. The police department is one big family.
But one officer noted, when the caskets are buried and the sun sets, it takes with it the soul of a warrior and the hope of a city. It was that way on 105th Street and 161st Street on Tuesday night. I'm Mary Murphy, Channel 2 News.
Many of the expressions of sympathy arriving at Officer Busick's precinct are from children. Amid the flowers and cards and letters are messages of consolation from elementary school kids. A 6th grader from IS 143 writes, "It is a tragedy that we have lost one of the best police..."
With Steve Powers and Barbara Laskin.
Good evening. There was a funeral today, and a bit of every New Yorker's life was buried, along with 2 brave policemen who died shot down in our streets. They were out there trying to make a difference in a street world where a quick high is more important than life itself. Officers Christopher Hoban and Michael Busick were gunned down in 2 separate drug-related incidents Tuesday night, but today their deaths were mourned in one huge outpouring of emotion, as Penny Crone reports.
It was the largest police funeral in our city's history. Officials say more than 12,000 law enforcers from New York and throughout the country came to pay their respects to officers Michael Buczek and Christopher Hoban. As police officials and politicians looked on, a lone bagpipe player played Amazing Grace. For almost 10 blocks, Fifth Avenue in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn was filled 10 deep with solemn police officers. Local residents watched from behind police barricades as the caskets and the officers' friends and families entered Our Lady of Perpetual Help for the funeral mass. The church was filled to capacity, and everyone prayed for the two officers. Paralyzed police officer Stephen McDonald looked on as the eulogy was given by Father Victor Olto.
You know, it seems fitting today that Michael and Christopher lie together in this church because they shared so many common bonds. They were gifted, for example, with good, loving, hard-working parents. Parents who taught them many things, but most especially taught them what it means to serve others without counting cost or reward.
Bishop Francis Mugavera was the principal celebrant. And during the Mass, John Buczek, Michael's father, handed out a note that summed up his family's thoughts. This is how it read. There are no words to describe our family's grief. Michael gave up his life to fight the war on drugs. All we ask is that our nation's government support the death penalty and provide the funding necessary to win the drug war. Nobody can ever bring back Michael to us, but perhaps his memory can demonstrate the importance of ending this atrocity that has inflicted each and every one of us.
I've lost my compassion for the user of drugs. He or she is just as responsible as the seller of drugs for the climate that is allowing the deaths of people throughout this country, making the streets unsafe.
A friend of Christopher Hoban had this to say.
Well, he was a gentle person, enthusiastic, just loved life, and we're all going to miss him an awful lot. Everybody from the neighborhood and to his parents. He had a wonderful son.
Michael Buczek leaves a wife. He was 24 years old. Christopher Hoban leaves his parents and two brothers. He was 26 years old. From Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, I'm Penny Crone, Fox News, Channel 5.
And there is new information tonight about one of the men charged with killing Officer Buczek. Antonio Mena, picked up yesterday, has been in police...
Hundreds of area residents marched with the parishioners of St. Rose of Lima Church. They went to pray at the place where last Tuesday a drug dealer gunned down police officer Michael Buczek. The parish pastor, Father Richard Adams, said he was praying for the quick and sudden death in God's grace of all drug dealers. Yesterday, funeral services were offered for Buczek and Officer Christopher Hoban, the other cop killed by a drug dealer Tuesday. And today, Mayor Koch was thinking of those police officers as he talked about the new federal death penalty for drug dealers passed by Congress on Friday.
We now have the death penalty in the state of New York. We have it. The new federal law. No matter what the state legislature failed to do, we now have it in the state of New York.
Koch says he has asked the city's district attorneys to turn drug-related murder cases over to federal prosecutors who will be able to call for the death penalty. So far, 3 people are in custody in the Buczek and Hoban shootings. One other suspect is still at large.
She heard the sounds of gunfire, and within seconds, she'd become an innocent victim. A Queens mother is dead tonight, killed by a...
General and Heisman Trophy winner Pete Dawkins, he's forced the incumbent on the defensive.
Is that the level that you want to bring this campaign to? Pete, I think you're out of control.
Castillo. Police think Castillo is the triggerman in the death of Officer Chris Hoban. Castillo was reportedly in the Harlem apartment this morning, but escaped just minutes before the cops arrived. 26-year-old Hoban was gunned down during a buy-and-bust drug operation Tuesday night. Today, Mayor Koch called for federal help in the city's drug problem.
It would be over $2 billion for treatment. Well, we can't afford that. The federal government should afford it, because they made it possible to bring those drugs in. And we should say then, by law, you're a drug addict, get into treatment. You don't go into treatment or you break treatment, we'll put you in jail.
In jail tonight are 3 suspects in connection with the Tuesday night murders.
There were a few moments of terror for some motorists on the New Jersey Turnpike last night. They were bombarded by rocks. There were no serious injuries, but
Pouring of love from the police department and from ordinary citizens has kept her going. Sarah Wallace will have a complete report on the Hoban family on Eyewitness News at 6.
And still ahead, coast-to-coast campaigning for the presidential candidates. George Bush in Michael Dukakis's backyard amid charges from the Democrats of race.
We'll have more next on Eyewitness News at 6.
They're here. The 89 Jeep Wranglers have just arrived at your Jeep Eagle dealer. But there's no room, so they've got to go. That's why we've got prices.
3 people treated at the scene. 6 people were taken to Bellevue Hospital. At least 4 people remain unaccounted for in the rubble. We'll have a full update later in the broadcast.
And in other news, 2 Mexican police officers are charged tonight with conspiring to smuggle an especially potent type of heroin into the United States. During arraignment today,
Tell Castillo. Police say he's the man who pulled the trigger, killing undercover officer Christopher Hoban last Tuesday night. Police saturated a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan this afternoon, acting on a tip that Castillo was there. But once again, police came up empty. The family of Christopher Hoban believe Castillo's arrest will come. It's just a matter of time. In an exclusive interview, the Hoban spoke to Sarah Wallace, and for the very first time as a family, they talked about the death of Christopher.
Oh, I think our strength is coming from my faith and from my family. I'll always remember him as a beautiful, gentle person. Nothing is ever going to change that.
She is so strong, this open, warm Italian mom, devoted to her husband and 3 sons, 26-year-old Chris, the oldest, then Martin, now 22, and Thomas, 20. The Hoban's block in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn is a quiet, tranquil street, but there is a drug war in this city, and its violence hit home last week in a way this family has always dreaded. Today, Chris's parents and brother Martin wept and talked and wept with me. It is the toughest time now, that time when the tributes and ceremonies are over, when the friends have gone back to their lives, and you know yours will never be the same.
I want him to be remembered as one of the persons whose life was not sacrificed in vain.
Last Tuesday night, Chris, an undercover cop for the past year, was shot during a buy-and-bust drug deal in Manhattan Valley.
And they said when he was very critical, he was shot in the chest, but he was also shot in the head. And then when I heard that, the first thing I did is ask to go up to the chapel. We knew then that, you know, Christopher was gone from us.
But Chris's brother still plans on taking the police entrance exam this week.
We do have the same name, you know, and I don't know about legacy or what, but I'll always have a piece of him in my heart, and I'll always know that he's with me.
The cards and letters of support continue to pour into the Hoban home. And on Saturday, 12,000 police officers offered their personal support at a joint funeral honoring Chris and another fellow cop, Michael Busick, killed in a separate gunfight involving drugs.
As a mother, my son could have been on the front page of the paper for some drug-related crime. And I would have been devastated, even then, as a mother, because I feel sorry for every junkie's mother in this world, mother and father. But at least I had the satisfaction of knowing my son at least died a hero. It's some consolation. It's not going to return him, but we can walk proudly.
From Brooklyn, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
We greatly appreciate the Hoban family in the midst of their grief and suffering to have taken their time to share their thoughts with all of us. Thanks.
And when Eyewitness News continues.
And last seen wearing a gray and black sweatshirt. Castillo reportedly slipped away from a police dragnet in Manhattan over the weekend. Police say that they believe that he is the man who fired the shots, killing Hoban during an undercover buy-and-bust operation a week ago tonight.
Many of you remember the story of David Rothenberg, horribly burned by his father and forced to be covered behind a protective mask. His story was the subject of the ABC TV movie. Shocking Rothenberg's reaction to the death of his illegally adopted... The third suspect in the murder of undercover New York City police officer Christopher Hoban was arrested in Puerto Rico today. Arrested by the FBI on information provided by the New York Police Department. We have two reports on the capture, beginning with Kathy Wolf.
Take a good look. This is what thousands of police officers have been longing to see for 9 days. Accused cop killer Bienvenido Castillo in custody. The FBI, working with the New York City Police Department, apprehended him today in Puerto Rico following a massive manhunt.
At 1:15 p.m. today, FBI agents in Puerto Rico arrested Bienvenido Castillo on a federal warrant for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. At the time he was arrested, he resisted and attempted to flee on foot. He was subdued by the agents, handcuffed, and taken to the San Juan FBI office.
That welcome announcement follows a massive 9-day manhunt. Hundreds of New York City police officers and 70 FBI agents searched for the killer of Christopher Hoban. Hoban was a 4-year veteran of the force. The 26-year-old was shot on October 18th during a buy and bust operation in Upper Manhattan. He managed to shoot and kill one of 3 suspects. Another was apprehended that night. But 24-year-old Bienvenido Castillo got away. Mayor Ed Koch today, delighted by the news, only had one regret.
If he is convicted, he's only subject to, I think, a max of 25 years under New York law. I think that's what it is. Regrettably, the new federal law won't apply the death penalty because it was passed after the incident.
Over 70 FBI agents and hundreds of New York's finest engaged in the relentless pursuit. Tonight, they can finally sleep well. The man accused of taking one of their own, finally in custody. In Manhattan, Kathy Wolf, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
This is David Navarro in San Juan, Puerto Rico. With the arrest this afternoon of the 24-year-old Dominican Republic national Bienvenido Castillo on the island, the manhunt for New York's most wanted criminal came to an end. Federal agents brought the suspected killer of Officer Christopher Hoban before a federal magistrate where he was arraigned under heavy security. Castillo told a reporter he's been in San Juan for 6 days. Authorities believe the fugitive fled to the island after taking a train to Florida and then catching a flight under an assumed name to San Juan's International Airport. Castillo is being charged with unlawful flight and conspiracy to traffic in narcotics here in Puerto Rico. Castillo was picked up at 1:15 this afternoon at a shopping mall in the Santurce section of San Juan. There was a chase, but he was eventually caught. And although he did struggle, no shots were fired. By 4:45, he was brought here to the San Juan Federal Courthouse for arraignment. During his arraignment, Castillo complained to the judge that he had been injured during the shootout that ended tragically in Hoban's death. This, despite the magistrate's warning, such statements could be incriminating. Castillo is currently being held at the San Juan State Penitentiary. He is scheduled to appear at a hearing tomorrow at 3 p.m., where his bail and the extradition proceedings will be set. Reporting from San Juan, David Navarro, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
And reaction to the arrest has been swift, from fellow officers of Christopher Hoban to his grieving parents. We have 2 reports beginning now with Sarah Wallace, who visited with the Hoban family.
For Christopher Hoban's parents, nothing will ever ease their sorrow over the loss of their oldest son.
We went yesterday and we went today to clean his apartment, and every time we looked at something, it just broke our heart.
But today's capture of his suspected killer leaves them hopeful for justice.
Well, I'd like to pull the switch if he's convicted. I would really like to pull the switch if he's convicted. That's how I feel about it.
He took my son's life for no reason.
And you think he should pay for it with his?
Oh, definitely. I have no doubt about that.
The Hobans are determined that Chris's death and that of fellow officer Michael Busick not be in vain.
These 2 deaths together have been a catalyst. And we think that things will change. We're praying. We are going to work for things to change, laws to change. And therefore, Chris's death will not have been in vain. Maybe he was put on this earth just for that reason. We have to believe there was a reason for his death.
They are also overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from all over the country. These 24 shopping bags are full of cards and letters.
We know that these are caring, loving people. and it has helped us. It has consoled us a great deal.
Like many families of officers who've become victims of the drug plague, the Hobans want their personal tragedy to make a public difference. They plan on becoming active in drug prevention efforts and in attempts to get tougher laws against drug dealers. From Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
It doesn't look like the Wild West, but there are gunfights in the streets here, and cops are killed. And like the Wild West, there is an increasing dependence on bounty hunters here in New York. You may have seen the billboards on buses or the big sign on the Bruckner Expressway, and you have probably noticed the generous reward of $10,000 in cash for a tip leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone who shoots at a police officer. It was a call to this cop shot hotline 2 days ago that helped federal agents figure out accused cop killer Benvenido Castillo was in Puerto Rico. He was arrested today, and tonight, the man who founded the cop shot program 4 years ago is pleased.
If and when a conviction takes place in the case, $10,000 in cash, not a check, but in cash, will be given to that concerned citizen who brought us this information.
It's tax-free money, isn't it?
That is correct.
The money comes from private donations, and since 1984, when the program started, the award has been paid 3 times. 6 other cases are pending. The incentive apparently works. One award will be paid if those accused of killing Officer Ed Byrne in Queens are convicted. Another will be paid if Larry Davis is found guilty in the Bronx. In each case, an anonymous tipster like this man will pick up the cash, no questions asked. Yet for some of the cops who knew Officer Christopher Hoban in Manhattan, a conviction for Castillo may not be enough.
He's still alive. All men is that there's no consolation to us. If we don't have a death penalty, it's not going to help.
Still, the word is out tonight that in New York City you can turn in a cop killer or would-be cop killer and make a good chunk of change. Louis Young, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Recapping tonight's top story, Benvenido Castillo, the 3rd suspect in the murder of undercover police officer Christopher Hoban, is under arrest. He was taken into custody this afternoon in Puerto Rico by FBI agents acting on information provided by New York City police. He will be brought back to New York to stand trial for murder.
Secrete Gable faced another round of tough questions today on the witness stand.
Uncovering a deadly record at a New York hospital. And then we'll tell you why.
Rules, said Judge Harold Rothwax. Again, at the emergency room, the paramedic described a coolly unconcerned Joe.
Channel 2 News at noon. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
Good afternoon, everyone. An accused cop killer could be brought home today.
It all depends, though, on a hearing in Puerto Rico. Police say they've got the man who shot police officer Christopher Hoban. The FBI grabbed Benvenido Castillo yesterday. They tracked him as he hopped a train to Florida and moved on to a flight to Puerto Rico. The confrontation came at a shopping center in a San Juan suburb. Correspondent Brian Williams is in San Juan and has this update.
Jim Carroll, we will see him for ourselves for the first time today in court. As you mentioned, a critical hearing at 3 p.m. 24-year-old Benvenido Castillo, nicknamed Danny, the result of a huge manhunt. NYPD, FBI, DEA agents stemming from New York, the Bronx, Manhattan Borough, all the way down to San Juan, Puerto Rico. All of it based on an anonymous tip from an unidentified source, so far unidentified according to the FBI. He was found picked up in the Santurce section of San Juan, a barrio, a shopping mall near that barrio. Reviewing now all of this, what happened that bloody night a few days ago for the NYPD. He was 26 years old, the New York police officer Christopher Hoban, a 4-year police veteran. He was killed, shot and killed over 1 gram of cocaine. Undercover, $100 buy. Pardon me, just $100. It happened on the Upper West Side. He was, of course, sadly, two police officers lost their life that night. Looking at the crime scene, it was apartment 19W, 105th Street on the Upper West Side. Hoban managed to shoot one suspect. He was killed. Another was arrested that night. And now this. A manhunt brings results here in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Again, a joint effort, NYPD, FBI, announcing the arraignment and booking here. A tentative booking pending that court appearance. 24-year-old Benvenido Danny Castillo, wanted for murder. Also, it is known now that Castillo was shot cleanly through the side in that gunfire the night that deal went down, the night Officer Hoban lost his life. New York City Mayor Ed Koch had this to say.
Benvenido means welcome, so my comment is welcome home, Benvenido, back to New York.
Mr. Castillo will be in court again at 3 o'clock in San Juan. We will, of course, be there. We're also going to be going through the barrio, through the neighborhoods, finding out just where he was, what the path was that led investigators, police, and FBI agents to him. The legal issue here in legalese is extradition. If he waives extradition, he could be in New York by tonight. That's all where charges will be pressed. If not, we're looking at a possible legal fight and a probable 10 days to 2 weeks before Castillo sees New York, before New York prosecutors get to see Castillo over the murder of Officer Hoban. So we will be in court today at 3 p.m. We will have, of course, much more live from San Juan, Puerto Rico, beginning on Channel 2 News at 5 and continuing on Channel 2 News at 6 tonight. For now, back to the studio, Jim and Carol.
Brian, thank you.
Well, police on the beat and, of course, the family of Officer Chris Hoban are feeling some relief today now that Castillo is in custody. They're also waiting for what happens next.
We are related, and I think tonight will be the first night we are all, my 2 sons and ourselves, will get a good night's sleep. Peace is with us now.
I say get the death penalty, because even though most times these guys would not, they think twice to shoot somebody.
I hope he gets the maximum for what he did, because it was a tragedy.
I think for us the pressure will be off a little bit in the 2-4, because we don't have to worry about him being out in the street.
Well, officials at the police department see the quick arrests as a warning to drug lords and would-be cop killers.
Some people are going after cop killers with a reward for information and a 15,000 square foot warning. The billboard on East 142nd Street in the Bronx is impossible to miss. Shoot a police officer, it says, and trigger a $10,000 cash bounty on your head. The idea comes from Cop Shot, the citizens' outrage at police being shot. The father of murdered Officer Edward Byrne helped to unveil this sign.
A high school student in Queens says that he was the victim of a racial attack. Kevin McAleer says that about 20 black teenagers beat him and robbed him on a bus yesterday afternoon. He says this group shouted racial slurs as they dragged
Manuel Antonio Pineda Oganda, a fellow Dominican, allegedly played chauffeur to Castillo while he hid out.
Yo no soy.
A close associate of Danielle's had assisted him in driving him around to various locations in an effort to find him lodging.
Castillo allegedly outran police after fatally shooting undercover narcotics cop Chris Hoban, then spent the next 3 days and nights shuttling between friends in Upper Manhattan collecting money and jewelry. 70 FBI agents and 100 police officers, often just hours behind Castillo, staked out New York's 3 major airports, Grand Central Station, and Port Authority, widely distributing his photograph.
We had several indications that we were right on his trail.
Even though the airports and train stations were covered, Castillo managed to get to Grand Central Station sometime Friday, buy a train ticket to Florida, and get away.
We can stake everything out so that even a flea couldn't get through it. I want all bad guys to believe that, but in point of fact, it's very difficult.
Police say Castillo went from New York to Miami, then sold some jewelry to buy a plane ticket to San Juan. At the same time, in New York, police continued making dozens of drug raids, several in the Washington Heights area, and sources say a suspect arrested in one of those raids gave police an informant's name, a Dominican friend of Castillo's. He's the one who police say led investigators to Castillo in Puerto Rico. At the Upper West Side apartment building where Castillo lived and Officer Hoban died, residents say they're relieved Castillo has been caught, but drug dealers, they say, are still around.
There's still a lot going on inside here. I mean, people in and out. I don't know what's going on in these apartments. But,
Still a lot of drug dealing?
Not inside the building. Calm down now.
Where is it now?
In the streets.
Investigators say they don't expect any further arrests in New York in connection with Hoban's murder, but they do want to question people who helped a man that police say killed one of their own. In Manhattan, Lisa Rudolph, Channel 2 News.
The police in Queens said today the beating of a white teenager by a group of blacks last night was apparently racial.
With weather and the Eyewitness News team.
Good evening, I'm Ernie Anastas, and here's what's happening. There is an unexpected snag tonight in police efforts to get accused cop killer Benvenido Castillo back to New York. The reason, when Castillo was arraigned in a San Juan, Puerto Rico courtroom this afternoon, he collapsed and went into convulsions. Right now, he is under guard at a hospital. David Navarro is covering the Castillo story in San Juan tonight, and he was in the courtroom when the man accused of killing New York officer Chris Hoban last week collapsed.
The 24-year-old fugitive broke out in what appeared to be an uncontrollable shaking fit. Court officers were forced to drag the accused killer out of the courtroom by his arms and legs as he foamed at the mouth. U.S. Magistrate Jesus Castellanos has decided to suspend further hearings until after Castillo is evaluated by a court-appointed psychiatrist. Law enforcement sources believe Castillo arrived in San Juan after traveling by train to Florida and then to Puerto Rico by air under an assumed name.
Yes, he did nominally resist arrest, attempted to flee and had to be subdued. There were no shots fired, of course.
The arrest took place yesterday in an area that is a favorite meeting place for Dominicans in the city. At the heart of it, the Dominican Republic consulate just across the street there. Eyewitnesses say Castillo had just left the building, quite possibly after making arrangements under an assumed name to go back to his homeland when the FBI made their move.
It was just people waiting for the bus like nothing. And the cops came, handcuffed the guy and took him.
Ramon Arrieta says he watched the arrest from his food cart across the street. Castillo, he says, tried to resist arrest, and agents were forced to subdue him, but no one was hurt. On his way to his arraignment yesterday, Castillo told a reporter he had been in Puerto Rico for 6 days. Later during the hearing, Castillo complained to the judge of injuries he had sustained when he jumped through a window to escape on the night of the shootout. The U.S. magistrate warned him such statements could be later used against him. Reporting from San Juan, Puerto Rico, David Navarro, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
This is Tim Minton. Shockingly, the accused cop killer was once a cop himself. New York City police confirmed tonight that Bienvenido Castillo's birth date exactly matches the one released earlier by Dominican Republic National Police. Dominican authorities said Castillo, who we now know is 27, was kicked off the force after a controversial off-duty shooting 2 years ago. Murder charges against him were filed, then dropped.
But if you want to know what Bienvenido Castillo was like before everybody knew who he was, you come to 104th Street on the 12th floor, because this is where he used to live. And around here, he was known as Daniel.
Police say Daniel had a record. 2 drug arrests, the most recent in August. And that's no surprise to Bernice Howard, who shared the apartment with him.
Had you any idea that he was selling drugs?
Yes, I did. I did have an idea. Matter of fact, I knew, but I had nothing to do with that. I just knew, you know, he stayed here and he wasn't keeping nothing here.
What did you know that he was doing?
Some narcotics. And, you know, he'd come here and sleep and he'd leave and that was it, you know. It was in and out, you know. He went to work and when he came in here, he went to sleep.
If he's convicted, 104th Street will seem like a 5-star hotel compared to the ex-cop's new sleeping accommodations in the Slammer. In Manhattan, Tim Minton, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
And tonight, doctors report in San Juan that it could be 3 weeks before Castillo can leave the San Juan hospital and return here to New York. He's accused of murdering undercover narcotics officer Christopher Hoban last week in a drug bust.
Police tell us tonight Castillo had help getting out of town and making his way to Puerto Rico, and they say they have one of the people who helped him. He's Manuel Antonio Camero Ogando, arrested today in an apartment in Upper Manhattan. And while he denies any connection with Castillo, police say tonight they know the two were together.
They did hook up immediately after the shooting, and that evening we have them placed at locations together the following day, right up until the Friday after the shooting.
Police say Camero Ogando and Castillo holed up in several apartments after the shooting until Castillo fled the country. Camero Ogando is booked tonight on a charge of fleeing prosecution.
Tonight, officials in Queens have classified a recent attack on a white teenager by a group of blacks on a city bus.
Keep on walking.
Continued making dozens of drug raids, several in the Washington Heights area, and sources say a suspect arrested in one of those raids gave police an informant's name, a Dominican friend of Castillo's. He's the one who police say led investigators to Castillo in Puerto Rico. At the Upper West Side apartment building where Castillo lived and Officer Hoban died, residents say they're relieved Castillo has been caught, but drug dealers, they say, are still around.
Still a lot of drug dealing? Not inside the building. Calm down now.
Where is it now?
In the streets.
Investigators say they don't expect any further arrests in New York in connection with Hoban's murder, but they do want to question people who helped a man that police say killed one of their own. In Manhattan, Lisa Rudolph, Channel 2 News.
Again, all legal action off here in San Juan temporarily because of what happened today in court, the physical convulsions Castillo went through. We'll be staying on here and tomorrow, pardon me, on Channel 2 News. Excuse me. We'll have more on who harbored Castillo along the trail here to Puerto Rico. Castillo, who is behind bars tonight in San Juan. That's the way things stand. More tomorrow night on Channel 2 News. For now, back to Jim and Michelle in the studio.
Brian, thank you. A Manhattan landlord's fight to evict a convicted drug dealer has turned into an uphill battle with the courts. It seems red tape is standing in the way of justice.
Burn Memorial Walk on Drugs. The marchers started in Long Island City, made their way across the 59th Street Bridge into Manhattan, and then came back to Queens. The anti-drug walk covered more than 6 miles.
Next on Eyewitness News, we'll have details of the second largest corporate merger in U.S. history, plus the search for clues on the murder of 3 men. Their bodies found wrapped in a sheet in the Forest Hills section of Queens.
$1,000 the moment of...
There have been other cops shot in the course of fighting the drug war in our city. Today, hundreds came out in Queens to show their support. Pauline Liu was there.
It looked for all the world like a parade, but today the message here was deadly serious. Hundreds took to the streets to march against drugs and to remember murdered police officer Eddie Byrne, who was killed earlier this year by a drug dealer's bullet. His parents and girlfriend led the way. Ever since he died, Matthew and Ann Byrne have vowed to keep their son's fight going.
We perceive Eddie's death as a death that occurred in the course of the war on drugs. And our family has vowed that whatever we can do to carry on what Eddie was doing in our own small way, we will do. And this is just one example of the type of thing that our family has become involved with.
The Byrnes know that the war on drugs is being lost. Since their son's death, more cops have been killed. The parents of slain officer Christopher Hoban also joined this march. Their pain is still very fresh. Their son and Officer Michael Busick were gunned down in separate drug-related incidents on the same night. They were both buried just over a week ago.
We don't feel that he had died in vain. There has to be a reason for it, because if we don't have that little faith, we have nothing. We have nothing.
And now you're fighting.
Oh, we're fighting. We're coming out rip-roaring strong, really. We always did feel strongly about drugs. Believe me, we always did.
And for the Hobans, the fear of drug crime just won't go away. Another son is preparing to become a cop. He took the test only yesterday.
We didn't want to stop him, but I do get bad feelings if he wants to go into undercover work.
Okay.
And I'm very honest about that. It's a very, very hazardous job.
The families took their message through the streets of Long Island City, then slowly made their way across the Queensboro Bridge and into Manhattan, marching more than 6 miles. This was the 3rd annual march organized by the Outreach Project, a drug treatment referral program.
What we're saying to each individual, we're saying to corporations, we're saying to the political community, the current situation is not getting better, it's getting worse. We all know that.
And this year, the message of this walk was an even more urgent one, since so many cops have been recently murdered because of drug-related crime. In Manhattan, Pauline Liu, Fox News.